It had that distinct smell that older buildings usually carry, especially hospitals. Antiseptic layered over something older, something that never really goes away. The walls had been repainted countless times, but the bones of the place were from another era. Narrow hallways, heavy doors, windows that didn't quite seal in the winter. Night shift changes a building. During the day, hospitals are loud and busy. At night, they breathe differently. Monitors beep in empty rooms. Ice machines drop cubes on their own schedule. Elevator doors open to floors where no one's waiting. At first, I jumped at everything that would happen. But when you work somewhere long enough, even the strange becomes routine. Call lights would flick on in empty rooms. You'd hear footsteps behind you in a hallway that you just checked to be empty. Doors that required effort to close would click shut softly on their own. Most of it I learned to laugh off. You can rationalize almost anything at 3 a.m. if you try hard enough. But every so often, something would happen that didn't feel mechanical. More aware. When I got a new partner, or when I was going to be off and someone was floating down to cover my shift, I would give them a quiet orientation, not the official one, the real one. I'd tell them which hallways not to linger in if they heard someone call their name. I'd tell them not to answer the phone on the desk near the old wing with the ring after 2 a.m. because there was no active line connected to it anymore. I'd tell them that if a patient complained about someone standing at the foot of their bed, they would document it, but they wouldn't argue. Most of them laugh. They always laugh. But more than once, someone would come find me later in the shift and say, "Okay, so something just happened." They'd describe shadows moving against the light from the nurse's station, and the unmistakable feeling of someone standing directly behind them, close enough to feel body heat, only to turn around to empty air. One girl didn't laugh at all. She was new, confident, the type who told her eyes at ghost stories. Her second night, she went pale around midnight. She didn't say much, just that she felt like someone was following her between rooms. She could hear them, walking. She asked if she had security cameras in the older wing. We didn't. Around 3 a.m., I couldn't find her. I assumed she was helping in a room or taking a break. Instead, I found a note at the desk. Short, apologetic. Said that she couldn't finish the shift. She never came back. No further explanation, just gone. That's when even I stopped laughing as much. There were nights when the air felt too thick. Nights when the call lights, long unused rooms flickered on and off in slow patterns. Nights when patients would pass, and for hours afterward, the hallway outside their room felt charged. You developed a kind of sixth sense in a place like that. You know you're not alone, and you know when you are. Eventually, the hospital was shut down. Budget cuts, restructuring, newer facilities built across town. I remember driving by months later, seeing heavy equipment tearing into it, walls exposed, floors ripped open, rooms that held so many vital moments reduced to rubble. I felt relief. I thought maybe whatever lingered there could finally dissipate. But sometimes I wonder, when a place like that is torn down, when the walls that held all that grief, fear, hope, and death are reduced to dust, where does that energy go? Does it fade? Is it scattered? Or does it simply wait for another building to settle into and to call home? I didn't leave this job, at least not while I was in the original building. I worked second shift at a call center in the early 90s. The business itself operated first shift, but we came alive around dinner time, calling households while people were watching TV or finishing meals. We occupied 2 buildings that had been renovated into one. 3 stories on one side, 4 on Each floor had a regular wooden door with a knob, like a closet. There was a safety lock so you couldn't open it unless the elevator was there. The door had one of those hydraulic arms at the top so that it would close gently and slowly. The elevator itself was barely bigger than a pantry. You controlled it with a rocker arm. Pull it up, push it down. If you didn't ease off at the right time, you'd stop between floors. New hires did it constantly. Rumor had it that the building used to be a hotel, a seedy one. Some said a brothel. There were whispers about murders, but I never confirmed any of that. I never went digging. I never saw anything myself, but other people did. There were occasional reports, shadows, figures, that feeling of being watched. One coworker I was very close with swore that she saw a woman in the big elevator going up, white dress, no face. She still stands by that story. And everyone agreed on one thing. The basement passageway to the break room felt wrong. It's the only way we could describe it. Even people who didn't believe in ghosts would hurry through it. For years, nothing major happened. Then we announced we were moving. Business was booming, and we were relocating 2 blocks south to a high-rise. Everyone was excited. New space, bigger floors, better lighting. And that's when things picked up. Sightings increased. More people reported feeling watched. Doors would slam on empty floors. There was a heaviness in the building that hadn't been there before. Or maybe we just hadn't noticed it until we were preparing to leave. We always had a reception station on the ground floor. I'll call her Athena. She had worked second shift with us for years and was not dramatic, not so over-exaggerated. One night, that small elevator's ground floor door slammed. Not closed normally, slammed. Hard enough that we heard it clearly on the second and third floors. I ran down the stairs. Athena was standing there, pale, completely pale. She just kept saying, "It just shut by itself." That shouldn't have been possible. That door had a hydraulic arm designed specifically to prevent it from slamming. It closed slowly, every time. We tried to force it over and over, and it wouldn't slam. The mechanism wouldn't allow it. But that night, it did. No one was in the elevator. No one was even near the door. After that, it felt like the building moved. Within weeks, we moved. The business thrived for years in the new location, then eventually got bought out and disappeared. The old buildings are still there. About 13 years after we left, another company moved into that space. I applied for a job there just to get inside again. I wasn't qualified. I didn't want the job. I just wanted to stand in those halls one more time. Now the building has been converted into luxury halls. Sometimes I think about the people living there. I wonder if the basement still feels wrong. I wonder if anyone has figured out how the elevator door managed to slam. And I wonder whether whatever was there got upset and left. Or if it was just reacting to being left behind again. We used to once dive deep in the basement of a library that was founded in the late 1800s. It was one of those beautiful old buildings with stone steps, worn smooth from a century of traffic. Tall windows, ornate woodwork, radiators that hissed in the winter. It honestly felt like that place remembered things. My office was in the basement, not the public basement with archives and storage, a restricted section. You need a key card to access the stairwell, and another key card to get through a second locked door before you could even reach my desk. Once I was down there, no patrons wandering in, no coworkers cutting through, just humming servers and fluorescent lighting that made everything feel slightly claustrophobic. Though I got used to it. Once a week I worked late They just said, come upstairs. You can finish your shift up here. That told me enough. I opened my office door and stepped into the hallway, despite the agony I was feeling. But it was empty. Completely empty. It was as if all sound had ceased the moment I opened the door. I didn't linger, I just walked quickly, not running, close, straight to the stairwell, and I left the basement behind for the night. Nothing else happened while I worked there, but I never stayed late comfortably again. This took place when I was in high school. I'm almost 40 now, but I was still living with my family in a condo. Mom, dad, younger brother. My dad worked evenings as a restaurant manager, so I wasn't home when these events occurred. And my mom worked days in the office, so she was home doing something in the kitchen. My brother was watching TV in the living room. This was back in the late 90s, early 2000s, so we had an old school PC in my parents' room. I loved using it. I was most likely downloading music, chatting on ICQ, 90s behavior. To the left of the computer desk was a foyer which lined bedroom closets with the door to the room at the end. As I was on the computer, I could see very clearly in the corner of my eye 2 legs walking towards the door, away from me. Zoned out in what I was doing, I just assumed it was my brother. I turned to look, and nobody was there. The door was half shut enough that I knew my brother wasn't that slick to squeeze through that fast. Add to that, I suddenly had an eerie feeling in my gut, and I froze. But I slowly went back to what I was doing. I brushed it off, kept it to myself. Not long after, about a week later, I'm having a conversation with my mom in the living room. We're standing at opposite ends, not a huge room, and where she was standing at a wall with 3 large mirrors. As she's talking, I see a blurry shadow figure run across the mirror. I interrupt her mid-sentence and say, Mom, don't freak out, but I just saw something in the mirror. She freaks out. Asian boys don't play with that shit. She goes, don't play like that. And I proceed to express how serious I am. She wasn't happy. Now, mind you, nothing really prompted my visions or behavior. I hadn't seen any movies or read any books that would fuel my imagination. At this point, I hadn't even told anyone what I saw, other than what had happened to my mom. Some time passes, about another week, and one day my dad comes home. He's a very social butterfly and made buddies with the building manager whose name was Rick. As he comes in, he goes, Guys, I just saw Rick. He said they found one of the tenants dead. Apparently, a tenant on another floor who lived alone had quietly passed, been dead for at least 2 weeks, or more, since nobody knew. Needless to say, this kind of shook me. My dad had no idea about my recent experiences. I immediately knew that this poor person's spirit had been wandering the building. I never got a negative feeling about it, so I can only assume that they were lost, trying to let us know. I never found out their name, but rest in peace. When I was in my late 20s, I took a job in a factory. Just a modern food production plant with bright lighting and constant machine noise. You had to wear protective eyewear, a hairnet, gloves were encouraged. It was strict about safety and contamination. I hated it. The work was repetitive and numbing in a way that sank into you. It was the type of job where time stretches instead of moves. I was deeply unhappy, in more ways than one. And I would sometimes find myself standing at my station, imagining what it would be like to just stop, to not have to keep going. One shift, I was in the middle of one of those thoughts, and someone spoke to me. An older man had walked right up beside me, close enough that I startled. He asked me how I liked working there. He wasn't wearing any of the required PPE, no hair lied, told him I liked it. We talked for a few minutes, a normal conversation. He asked questions, I answered. He seemed interested, not critical, just present. At one point, I turned my head to glance at a coworker nearby. When I looked back, the man was gone. I hadn't seen him walk away. He was just gone. There wasn't anywhere I could have disappeared to that quickly without me seeing him move. The factory floor was open, loud, visible in all directions. I finished the task I was doing and went to find my manager. I described the man and asked who he was. She went completely still. Then she told me to shut up. Not joking or teasing. She was serious. She said, "Who told you to invest with me?" I told her no one did. I was serious. And that's when she told me. An older man had worked there for decades. He'd been eligible to retire for years but refused. The factory was his life. He worked there until the day he died. She said that she and other employees had seen him before, walking the floor, checking in, still working. I don't know what unsettles me more about it. That I saw him, or that he showed up right when I was thinking about ending everything. Sometimes I wonder if he was just attached to the place, or if he walked up to me because he recognized something in my expression. It makes me sad to think that even in death, he might still be clocking in. And it also makes me wonder why he chose to ask me how I liked working there. The wind moved through the pines, brushing against the trunks and scattering brittle needles across the wet earth. Cooper was the first to see them. He was the first to run. Jesse and I followed, not knowing exactly what we were running from, and losing any sense of where we had started, with the zigzag pattern that Cooper made through the woods. Our progress was impossible to track. All the while, the heavy galley from behind kept its pace with us. We couldn't maintain our speed forever, and Cooper pointed to a tree with branches low enough for us to climb. All three of us were proficient climbers with or without our gear. He helped boost Jesse and I up. We shared the first branch that we could reach that could support our weight. As Cooper started to dig his boots into the bark of the tree, I tried to lay on my stomach, and I reached my arm down towards him. Jesse screamed, telling Cooper to hurry. He still a tree, and I remember the surreal feeling of Jesse's arms pulling me up, and then pulling me straight down. There was a flash of white light, and I saw the heaven's gate with my own eyes. The entrance was saturated in golden light. I heard the golden posts sing as they opened to accept my friends. But when it was my turn, the angels denied my entry, for reasons a human mind is incapable of understanding. The moment I woke up in my body, it became obvious the angels rejected me at the behest of their own cruel entertainment. My life had been far from saintly, but the company I kept were sinners just as I. If their acceptance was judged on any level of fairness, I'm confident I'd have been let in too. Angels don't concern themselves with fairness. However, that's a human construct that even we corrupt into a luxury amongst ourselves. True fairness was the forest indifference to my existence. I woke up in the rain, staring into the void of black clouds and tree limbs above me. It was daytime, but I could have been wrong. The canopy of branches blackened the forest floor. My heavenly vision, once thought to be a dream, would be realized shortly after that. As the rain puddled around me, I considered staying there. The Reaper had been following us since we began. I just hoped he could find me down there. I thought of my friends, my family back home. I wondered what they were doing. I tried counting the names that would miss me when I was gone, but dehydration made me delusional. Water was falling all around me. All over. It was a thought that wasn't mine. When I turned my body, I saw Cooper. He was twisted in such a way that I could already tell he hadn't survived. A large tree branch lay broken across his body. The same one we were on the night before. Rainwater had collected into a small pool on my head. I pressed my lips to the water and drank until my teeth brushed the soil. It was less than a sip, just enough to motivate me to want more. The fall that took Cooper's life had left me somehow physically uninjured, aside from minor scrapes. Jessie was gone. We all should have landed in the exact same area, but one of us didn't. I'd see her multiple times after that, only in spectral form, walking between the trees, looking down at me from rocky ledges. If this was her ghost trying to contact me, I would have preferred she helped me leave the forest, instead of lingering just out of view. She blamed me for what happened. Her haunted presence beckoned for reasons. These answers, I used to think there was a new sense of knowledge for granted after death. But Jessie didn't act like she perceived higher enlightenment. We were both still lost in the woods, regardless of the planes we were on. Is there no peace, death? Does the afterlife not allow rest? Jessie remained silent. My boots left shallow impressions that water filled in behind me as the sun sank beneath the clouds. I knew the same creature that hunted us the night before would soon be hungry. And though the thought of dying in such a violent way did scare me, it wasn't as much fear as I would have expected myself to have. Hope slowly decayed into numb acceptance. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a shadow waved at me, cast by a tree branch. I followed its dance further into the forest to find meaning in the shadow's art. The darkness waved like a conductor's horn, like the branches or the wind's movements. It wait for my interpretation. Its performance was not for me, but I watched it nevertheless, in a delusional enchantment. I called out to it once, but my voice was swallowed by emptiness, leaving behind only the cold confirmation that nothing answered. I sat down at the base of the tree, and I accepted my time on planet Earth was coming to an end, be it by east or dropping temperatures. I didn't plan waking up again. I was grateful to rest. An electronic beam cut into my conscious attention as my eyes closed shut. In a single blink, I was no longer cold, and the ground felt soft. Clouds and trees were replaced by a smooth white ceiling, and I heard my mom cry out, "She's awake." I'd been rescued by a real-life Boy Scout troop, one that had set up camp near where I collapsed. A little boy told his scoutmaster that he'd seen a dead woman lying by a tree. I'd managed to wander myself close enough to some sort of civilization, within a few kilometers at least. Close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. I refused to call it divine intervention, but at the same time, believe that something past the realm of luck that I'd survived. It all started during a journey to Ireland, where I planned on staying for a couple of months and exploring some of the amazing legends of this wild land. It was late October, and the winds around the Atlantic coast were announcing their strength in a manner that was hard to ignore. I'd driven far into the countryside before I realized how low the sun was getting in the western sky. That time of year, the day's light becomes a frugal offering. The winds were showing no hope of easing, and there was no sign of a hotel or any guest lodging that I could find as I inched along the winding one-lane roads. In that time, the mid-1990s in Ireland, it was completely acceptable to ask for lodging at almost any of the larger homes that dotted the hills. The dying light washed over a lone Georgian manor house standing alone, almost directly in front of me. As I drove the long road up to the house, I noticed the only lights that I could see were in the small cottage behind the looming habitat on the hill. A small column of smoke was dancing its way into the evening sky, making the scene appear warm and welcoming. I could see someone coming towards the small house, riding an old tractor. Being raised on a cattle ranch in West Texas, such scenes always put me at ease. I pulled up to the house. I walked over to the cottage around the back. I removed my old cowboy hat, humbly knocked on the door. It was the first time I'd tried this custom. I was hoping that I had the information correct. A small, sturdy-looking woman, wearing a well-loved apron, answered the door, wiping her hands dry from what appeared to be a very hearty dinner that she'd been preparing. "Ma'am, I was wondering if y'all had a room that I could take for the night. I'll be happy to pay you for my stay, but I don't know these roads." And just then, the man from the tractor walked up and started removing his boots. The woman turned to him and explained, "This one wants to know if we could put her up for the night." He glanced at me and my rental car, visible beyond my shoulder. "You could stay in the main place. We haven't got it ready yet, but you can have the run of the place if you'd like it." "Absolutely. What will I owe you for tonight's rent?" The two looked at each other in a moment of confusion. "About £12, the man offered cautiously. Even in 1996, that was quite a bargain. I reached into my pocket and counted out the coins, and I was given the keys to the entire house. The woman offered to stop in and make sure the meat was ready for the fireplaces, that I had tea, something light to eat. She said she'd stop by in the morning and bring me something to start my day's journey. As I gathered my backpack out of the car, I took some photographs of the house. A gnarled and unusual tree caught my attention in the dying sunset. It appeared to be guarding an old cemetery near the house. A family cemetery, I thought to myself. anyway. They are nothing more than good tales to be told on a cold winter's night, or so I believed. Entering the house, I was hit by the realization that the inside of the house was actually colder than outside. The woman was bringing in a couple of buckets of peat, wood for the fireplaces, and assured me they would warm up very quickly. As she left to bring a kettle of food, I went upstairs to find my room. I was surprised at the number of choices of rooms that awaited me. Something seems to draw me to the large room at the top of the stairs. From the looks of it, one would be about the same as the others. The sparsity of the furniture made the room look quite stark. The entire area was decorated solely with two small twin beds nearest the door, and a mirror and a dresser at the end of the room. No pictures on the wall, no books. Just a very stripped room. But for that price, it was still a bargain. I heard my hostess shuffling in the kitchen downstairs, and I went down to join her and see if there were any last-minute instructions I needed to know. I also wanted to thank her again for taking me in on such a harsh night. Only you will have the keys because there's only this one set that we have. Please take care. I don't plan on going anywhere. In fact, we might consider working out whether you'd let me stay for a few days. I'd enjoy exploring this area so much more thoroughly than I have so far. I implored my best Southern manners. Sometimes a Southern draw can open doors that might otherwise stay closed. The woman looked almost guilty for a moment and then replied, "Certainly, but let's talk tomorrow. I've got a world to do at home." I walked her to the front door and locked it as she left. I laughed at myself for a moment. I must have been living in cities too much if I think about locking a door this far away from home. Nonetheless, it stayed locked, and I placed the keys on the kitchen table next to a warm tea, sandwiches that had been graciously offered. The warmth of the food and the glow of the fireplace was easing me into a delicious state of relaxation and ease. It was definitely getting late, and I could see the stars coming out like I hadn't seen since I was a kid. They looked like diamonds scattered across black velvet. The windows were exceptionally cold, and they had old wooden shutters to bolster against the raging autumn weather. As I reached to close the first window shutter, I noticed that the house I saw was actually a facade, that the true house was several inches back from the pebble wall. This was frequently done about a century ago, when Ireland was recovering from the Great Famine. Some folks managed to gather enough together to make some improvements to the family homes, and facades became fashionable. This must be one such home. I noticed that the last glimmer of the sun was poised exactly in between the two western-facing wooden shutters. The shutters closed exactly in line on the true west at that time of the year. I walked to the other side of the room and realized that the windows were exactly in opposite of one another. One was due west, one was due east. I looked forward to seeing the sunrise. In a few minutes, that thought would mean far more than it ever had. I put on my headphones. I found an old magazine to read that had been stuffed under one of the small mattresses. The light from my camp light was starting to flicker, and I wasn't sure how much more light I could get. While reading, I was trying to figure out why so many people were separated in Ireland, and yet were out and proud about wanting to date. I had no idea that divorce was illegal in Ireland at the time. Chuckling to myself and preparing to settle in for a good long night, I was brought to full attention by somebody that sounded like it was walking swiftly on stairs. I went to the window. I could see that the car remained the only thing out there. From that angle, I could also see the front door was still closed. The boots persisted. It was as if they would reach the top steps and start over again. As I reached for the doorknob, it was as if the door actually exploded. The noise seemed to assault my soul. It was loud, mysterious. I jumped back about a full meter, flat-footed, and was beginning to rethink every life choice I'd ever made. The boots suddenly started moving at an impossible speed. They would stop with each step. I could feel them through the floor. I could taste my heartbeat. My camp light went dark, and I searched to find the old light. And as I did, I noticed something was moving in the mirror at the end of the room. There was nothing in front of the mirror, so I couldn't believe what I was seeing. As I started to approach it, the thing in the mirror started to move faster and faster. I sat back on the edge of the bed, and I tried to drown out all the chaos that seemed to flood this house, hoping that my batteries would keep me taken. As I was reaching for anything I could recall in any science class that could explain Brett's experience, I had the distinct sensation of something pushing down ever so slightly on the mattress I was sitting on. I also noticed that when I turned my head toward that area, I could see my breath. I couldn't see it when I was facing forward, but when I turned to look at the now slight depression-looking bed, I could see my breath like I had just polished off a pile of candles. The boots on those stairs were not alone, and neither was the dark image in the mirror. I didn't dare try to sleep, and I knew that I couldn't get to my car without going through the boots, and touching that door was definitely not going to be allowed. All I could do was sit and read that sad, tattered magazine. As little as possible. This continued till about 6:30. I was exhausted beyond belief, but just as the sun's first rays of the day struck across the eastern facing shutters, the house was calm, as easily as I had ever imagined. I immediately grabbed my backpack and gathered every bit of remaining strength to try to open that door again. It opened with ease. No boots, no damage. I raced down the stairs and out the door. I left the money and the keys on the table. There was no need to explain. I was quite certain the owners knew what happened. After all, why else would they choose to live in a tiny service cottage? As I turned on the radio, I was informed that the day was dawning on Samhain, the Irish festival of magic and ancestors. You might have heard it called Halloween. A few weeks after I'd returned to the States, I'd taken my hundreds of photographs in for processing. My goddaughter wanted to stop by and sort through them with me, and we planned a lovely evening of popcorn, slightly altered consciousness, regaling of adventures. As we sorted through the pictures, she came across one that I'd taken to the Irish house before I entered that night. "What's this?" she asked with curiosity. "Oh, that's just a weird house I stayed in one night. I don't know that much about it." "Who is that in the window? Did they do some kind of theater there? You know, like a murder mystery thing." I took the photo from her and looked carefully at the three faces in the top floor window in the exact same room I chose to stay in. With great solemnity, I replied, "I'm sure it's just paranoia. It's just our eyes playing a trick. Nothing more." The following day, I took the photo and was negative back to the film processing business that I'd used for many years. I was a very good customer. We did a lot of business together thanks to my amateur photography interest. I any more such business. I've mailed it to you. You should have it tomorrow. The click of the phone as he ended the call felt like a slap across my face. Was that place immersed in curse? The next day the package arrived. As I opened it, I could clearly see the face of an old white-haired woman with a black dress, wearing a white cameo brooch. On her high collar, her first mate to the window. Next to her was a younger man with a handlebar mustache and starched white collar. On the pane below was a small young girl with her hair disheveled, her head hanging down as if she was crying. I sent the picture off to a television show that covered such phenomena. It was called Sightings. They had responded and said that they were interested in pursuing the story. Then the show was suddenly canceled. The camera film shop burned in an unexplained fire. My copies of the negative and the photo were lost when a flood blasted through my home in the middle of the night. That part of town had never flooded. I lost everything. If you ever find yourself driving the backcountry roads in Ireland near the wild Atlantic coast, aim for a hotel in a large city. Our grandparents took us when our biological parents were seen as unfit by the courts. My sister Kaylee's 3 years older than me. She's always had a darker aesthetic, a true goth. Kaylee really leaned into the broken, dysfunctional family identity, even though our grandparents were perfect guardians to us. In high school, she started practicing witchcraft, but I was never allowed to practice or learn the techniques. It was a secret that I accidentally stumbled into after going in her room unannounced one night. Kaylee's room was in the attic, and when I walked in, there's a small, narrow set of stairs before I could see her room. Her lights were off, but I could see this faint glow of candles reflecting off the ceiling. Instead of just calling her name, I decided to tiptoe on the stairs to see what she was doing. When I got to a step where I could visibly see into her room, Kaylee's back was facing me. She was sitting on the ground, and there was a candle on either side of her. And directly in front of Kaylee, I see a young man crouched on his knees, and it looks like they're talking. I thought Kaylee had somehow snuck a never stepped down to the last step before the bottom. I could now see up to their shins. The room was on the opposite end of the hallway. The bathroom was right in the middle. I started slowly backing up towards my room. It took the final step, and I could see about up to its knees. I turned, I ran on the last couple of steps, and I slammed the door of my room, just as the sound of bare keys flapping on the wood behind me started. The next morning, I left my room and the door to the attic was closed again. With the sun, I was feeling brave enough to swallow that feeling of dread and go investigate Katie's room. I popped open the door and walked up the stairs. The temperature was noticeably cold and cool, like I'd stepped through a barrier in the hallway. It didn't make sense. I flipped on the light. The room was empty. I assumed everything was just how she left it. I walked to the other side of her bed, to the same area she was sitting with the candles that night. The waxy remains were hardened to the floor, and in between them were carvings of the wood. There was a yes and a no, and it looked like she carved out the alphabet in all capital letters. I realized what I was looking at was a homemade Ouija board. Then, right next to all of that, sitting under her bedside table, I found papers of conversations Kaylee had meticulously written out, all apparently corresponding with something. She documented the questions that she asked, along with the responses she received. Near the end, I started feeling like I'd really intruded on my sister's privacy, because from what I gathered, the thing that she was talking to was named Otis, and originally, the note started with her trying to get some sort of revenge on a classmate, one who wronged her at school. In another conversation, on another piece of paper, it's insinuated that her revenge plot had been successful, though I wasn't able to figure out what exactly happened. But it was visceral, and made Kaylee second guess what she was doing. Otis insisted what had happened to her classmate as a result of her spell was necessary in order to successfully resolve Kaylee's issue. More pages revealed Mrs. Grove's infatuation with Kaylee. In one string of dialogue she wrote, "I don't love you. I love the idea of you, but even that's become a burden to my senses." There's a full page after that whenever Otis repeats, "Let me in," over and over, until Kaylee says, "Please stop." I know in theory, in retrospect, by all means, everything I found in her room was terrifying beyond belief. But as I sat in this cold, dimly lit attic, reading through the remaining pages, I couldn't help but cry. It was a story about a lonely girl who met a lonely ghost. The ghost owed itself to Kaylee. For a moment, it seemed like she loved Otis too. Unfortunately, these notes weren't dated, so I couldn't tell how long these took to transpose. Otis suggested there's ways that they could possibly be together, by her joining him on his side, or him joining her. The idea of this fantasy becoming reality scared Kaylee, and she tries to slow it down. I empathize for Otis. If he were living, Kaylee's emotional flip and change of behavior would have been extremely hurtful. I think from his perspective, it was like he suggested they move in together. He felt scorned, and that's how he began to act near the end. Threats, accusations, anything to hurt Kaylee as much as she'd hurt him. There was this, but on the other side of the coin, I also had to empathize with my sister, because if Otis were living, he most likely wouldn't have asked her to unalive herself or be possessed, essentially. Either way, the last few pages were just sad all around for all parties involved. This was the reason Kaylee joined the military, to escape the oppressive squeeze that she felt tighten around her soul. It ended with Otis telling Kaylee that he'd wait there forever. I sat at the end of Kaylee's bed and cried until my tears began to wet big goodbye, and then crossed it out. I defaced the rest of it until it was unreadable. It looked like a big dog had been digging with his nails in the ground for months. At least that's what my grandpa would think it looked like when he went up there looking for who knows what weeks later. I pretended that it was my first time seeing it and told him, yeah, I came sneaking around a friend's husky the last couple of weeks she was living here. Grandpa says, and it didn't bark once. I tell him it barked all the time. I thought he knew about the dog because he and Grandma were just ignoring it. When he asked about the candle wax, I told him Kaylee's irresponsible, and that's why I should get the car that he was going to give her after she completed boot camp. I didn't think that was very fair, but he said if I joined the military, he'd give me Grandma's car. Lo and behold, I'd still get Grandma's car even without enlisting. Rest in peace, Dolores. You were an absolute amazing substitute mother, and you kept your car in wonderful shape. I've been a fan of your show for years, and I thought it's time to write. Life moves fast, and I'm usually chasing time rather than catching it, but this is something that stayed with me for a while, and lately I've felt the quiet nudge to finally put it into words. This happened a few years ago, while I was living in an apartment filled quite literally with history. I sell antiques and vintage items on eBay, so my home has always been full of old furniture, artwork, religious objects, and small curios that I've collected over time. Nothing felt unusual about that. It was simply the texture of my daily life. One afternoon, I had my armoire open, and I was sorting through a jewelry box, where I kept several religious trinkets, rosaries, and medals that I'd acquired over the years. I mention this because perhaps it had something to do with what happened to me next. Back then, I also had 4 rescued cats. They followed me everywhere. If you've ever lived with happy cats, you know, tails lifted high, curved at the tip like a question. Wherever I went, there they were, paddling along behind me like a strange little procession. While I was standing in the hot bar, I became aware of a sound, one that hadn't been there before. It was a long, grinding noise, mechanical. It would go on for a few seconds and then stop abruptly, only to start again. I froze. My first thought was oddly specific. A bird stuck in the fireplace flue. That had happened once before, and it sounded similar. Scraping, stopping, starting again. Still, despite trying to reason with myself, fear settled into me fast and heavy. I closed the armoire, set the relics aside, and began to move slowly toward the sound. The cats followed at first, but their tails were no longer relaxed. They were puffed up now, their bodies low and tense. One of them darted ahead of me, toward my stepson Gregory's room. The moment he reached the doorway, he reacted in a way that I had never seen before. Scrambling backward, as if he had hit an invisible wall. Claws scrambling for purchase before he fled. That was when I looked into the room. It was late afternoon, but his room was dark, with just a weak bit of sunlight leaking through. I gasped at what I saw. Gregory's remote-controlled toy Bronco was driving itself. Its headlights were on, bright in the dim room, and the toy was moving with intent, rolling forward, crashing into toys, reversing when it got stuck, then changing direction, and going again, over and over. That grinding sound was the Bronco's wheels and motor, stopping and starting in deliberate cycles. I stood there, unable to move. My blood felt cold. I remember thinking very clearly that if the batteries were dying, the toy wouldn't behave like that. It wouldn't navigate obstacles. It wouldn't reverse on purpose. chest. Is this a poltergeist? I thought. Eventually, I broke out of my paralysis long enough to grab my phone and call my husband, Al.